want to start off with Lions Vikings. It was such an awesome matchup coming in. It was one we previewed, I think, for good reason. There were so many interesting matchups. I do want to start Detroit's offense versus Minnesota's defense, which again is like my favorite offensive play caller against my favorite defensive play caller at this time, and kind of seeing what they were going to cook up. I'll defer to you first here because I think there's a lot we can go with. You can talk about Jared Goff. You can talk about Ben Johnson. You can talk about a lot of different things. Where do you want to start here?
Yeah, I have a lot of notes for this game, both on our Google Doc and in my head. But I do want to start with kind of the sequence of events for Detroit's offense in this game, where you start off in the first quarter and you weren't able to get anything going on offense. Both the run game and the pass game were just not doing well. And you really have this shift in how the offense played the rest of the game, where in the second quarter, they had a negative 16% pass rate over expected. So they really wanted to establish the run. You have the Gibbs explosive run that really starts to open up things for the offense. And then you come out in the third quarter and you have a plus 3% pass rate over expected. So you completely shift your identity on offense. And this is really where you saw Goff have some of his best drives of the game, where he decreased his average at the target. He was playing really well under pressure, and he was just getting the ball to his pass catchers like Amon-Ra St. Brown. And the offense had a lot of success through the air during this point. And so I looked through the entire season to see if it was kind of the pattern that the Lions usually follow, and it was. And you can see that this Lions team really likes to lean on the ground game with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs behind one of the better offensive lines in the league early in the game. And then they really like to open up the pass game going into the third quarter. And that was the recipe that worked in this game, even despite a bad first quarter.
I love it. And I love the ability and desire to continue with that run game when you go down 10-0. Where how many games have we seen this season already where the Vikings just jump on you and you're just drowning? So for them to do that, for them to decide to do that and have success there was really, really fun. I thought the Vikings early on, they had some success kind of attacking both of the edges in the run game. They obviously got him on that kind of double mug look a little bit earlier in the game. I wanted, Jared Goff, wow, like he's really playing lights out right now. And I do like that you mentioned that high run rate because, he's going to have less attempts overall. Like he's not going to be dropping back 40, 50 times a game. And that's okay. Like you don't have to be doing that to be playing quarterback at a high level where he had a really good rep, like stepping up in the pocket where we were talking about it. It's like, man, like that's just like, it's so rare to see that where it feels like you have the ability to see the guy that's obviously behind you, like you have eyes in the back of your head and be able to step up or you're avoiding any sort of kind of sack fumble in that situation. Of course, Goff did fumble on some sacks later in the game, but he looked really, really calm. He was able to do the like, hey, we're going to check. And then the Vikings are going to check out of their look because they know that we just switched. And then you have to get back to your original play. So I felt like he was handling that really, really well. And just on his tape over the last few weeks, there's just so many good reps. And there's not a lot of reps where I'm looking at it. I'm like, man, I'd want the ball in a different spot. And just repeating that over week after week, it just bumps you up kind of in the overall quarterback conversation. And certainly in my mind in general, of course, he missed one throw later on in the game that we'll talk about, but like where Goff is playing, when we think about some of his flaws last year, where it was just like, oh, if you're creating internal pressure, he's going to kind of combust a little bit. He's going to roll out and dirt the ball. Like he's just great under pressure all of a sudden. Like what a great thing for the Lions offense.
That is the thing to follow with the Lions offense for these next couple of weeks is how much of Goff's ability under pressure right now is kind of what he's going to be the rest of the season as a quarterback versus like some just positive variance in his direction, where you have Goff in 2022 and 2023 where he had a negative zero point 0.7 EPA per play when pressured, which was one of the lower marks in the league. We talked about it on the show before, but there weren't many quarterbacks in the league that had as big of a difference between their production stats when kept clean and when pressured. But Goff was one of those quarterbacks that had a big drop off when that happened. This season, he has a negative zero point 0.5 EPA when pressured. So he's doing a decent amount better there. And you really saw that in this game. And Next Gen had a really good stat on this where they pointed out over the past 2 weeks, Goff has completed 16 of 18 passes under pressure for 342 yards and 4 touchdowns. His 11.6 yards per attempt under pressure this season is the highest in the league, while no quarterback has over 9 yards per attempt when under pressure. So this offense, because of their offensive line and the answers that they have to pressure and how well Goff is able to handle that pressure, is doing a lot better in what used to be their main area of weakness going into this season.
And we talked about our biases a little bit last week and my positivity bias, like because now I've seen multiple weeks of Goff doing it in a row. If it unfortunately turns out to just be variance and it's like, hey, it reverts back a little bit closer to last year, I'm just gonna be like, no, but I've seen it. Like I can believe it. I know it's there. I know it's there. And I think something that like I'm seeing, I'm believing, as you know, both of us have for multiple years, just what Ben Johnson is doing on offense is so great. I thought that they had really good answers for Brian Flores' pressure. Of course, I think the most kind of notable example is you get that wide receiver motioning in to block against a double mug look, where a lot of times, like the defense can always have one more rusher than you can block because, the quarterback's going to take the snap. So they could technically just say, hey, we're going to send 10 guys blitzing or 11 guys blitzing. You can only have 10 to block. But when you have kind of plus one on the defensive line just up front, then you're going to usually have like, hey, it's going to look like a one-on-one for every receiver. But now you motion a receiver into the core to kind of block the edge. You're sliding your offensive line the other way. You can deal with the most at like the outermost rusher. You're fine. Like you would be 7 for 7 up front if the defense was to rush. You kind of like waste a coverage player. Goff's able to hang in there and make a really nice throw. And also, like, even away from it, like Jameson Williams just cooks the defender there. So that was a really, really nice one. And they did have a package of plays for wide receivers motioning into the core. So it wasn't like, hey, this is just like never going to be seen in our offense. Like, I just love him. And I think Kevin O'Connell did a good job of this. We'll talk about it when we flip the sides of the ball here. But if you're a play caller that like has kind of specific answers for specific problems that defenses are presenting, but it's off of base looks that you're running. And it's like parts of formations that you see all the time, or it combines with motions that you're running all the time, where it feels like, hey, this can be kind of a normal play, but really it is like a specialty game plan specific. That's a sign of a really well developed system. And then a really well developed play caller where, I mean, I know how much you love the well is deep line for Ben Johnson. I think it's so true for him because you're seeing these things where it's like you have these designer play calls in the fourth quarter that are being set up by things that are happening earlier on the drive in the fourth quarter, where you get the one Goff, like it was just like a flat miss where he's throwing it. I think the ball kind of tails a little bit too far to his left, where receiver's kind of going in motion. And we see like Tyreek Hill, obviously over the last few years, he runs motion across the screen and then he gets vertical, but now we're running a double move off of that. So it's like the whole entire league is doing this same thing that they saw 1 year ago. And Ben Johnson's like, all right, cool. Like we can bump it up kind of in a different way. So just like so far, I feel like ahead of I think everyone in a lot of ways, where you have just like good ways to deal with the ways that I think the Vikings were bringing their that kind of double edge pressure a little bit later in the game. Also, just like a really really good Gibbs game, just like he really is moving at 1.5 speed. I think he's doing a great job in space, but obviously David Montgomery goes down early. He comes back, but when you have Gibbs that's playing like that, it feels like now I'm looking at a unit where like, oh, you don't have like a traditional outside receiver, who I think is like an easier criticism of the Lions, but like Ben Johnson has weapons there and he's making the most of everyone.
Yeah, I think Ben Johnson did two really good things in this game where you mentioned both of them. Riding the hot hand with Jahmyr Gibbs. You had an off game from David Montgomery. He gets injured early in the game. He has a fumble later in the game, which he almost never has. But Jahmyr Gibbs having 5.8 total EPA when rushing, plus what he added in the receiving game, especially on that last drive, was so crucial to this Lions offense. So really just feeding Gibbs down the stretch was really good play calling from Ben Johnson, and Gibbs made the most of his opportunities in this game, which was really cool to see. And then, like you mentioned, the adjustments that were made after the first quarter, having answers to what Flores was throwing at them in the first quarter, where they had a 31% success rate, and then they ended up finishing the game with a 41% success rate. So they were a lot better the rest of the game, especially in the second and third quarter. On offense, and that was a really good job by this play calling, this offensive coaching staff, by the Lions there. On the Vikings defensive side, like I thought Jonathan Gennard and Andrew Van Ginkel again were just like forces in the backfield. Like they are constantly getting pressure. They are schemed up really well in this offense or in this defense, but the Lions were just able to attack the middle of the field and try to just get the ball out quickly and really just hit some of the safeties and linebackers in the middle of the field, where they were able to have 11 passes over the middle of the field with a 73% success rate. So that was really good by the Lions when you had edge pressure from Grenard and Van Ginkel. You had your outside corners in Byron Murphy and Stephon Gilmore playing well. Like Lions just used the middle of the field in the pass game to avoid both of those scenarios.
And I do think the Vikings, they missed Blake Cashman a bit here, where he's done a good job in zone coverage this year, really just erasing some of those in breakers. Because I mean, we talked about it kind of previewing this game. Like, I think the smart approach is, you block it up as best as you can and throw a deep in breaker, because just like the way that they're going to play their defense, there's going to be kind of voids there. And if no linebacker is kind of falling back to that, there's going to be openings. So I'm glad that the Lions, they were pretty consistent in kind of pushing the ball down the field. So I liked to see that. And Tage, you know how much I love to see Kevin O'Connell offenses. I think we'll flip it over here to the Lions defense against the Vikings offense, where I will say, I think going back through the film, I thought Sam Darnold did play, decent outside of that interception. There was like a turn down, that kind of late throw on the run that he had. He made this really tough sail throw later in the game. He hits that deep ball to Jordan Addison. Like how Kevin O'Connell just calling the, hey, we're backed up, we're going to take a play action deep shot. Love it, Kevin. Keep on keep on doing it. Darnold had a bunch of reps where he's kind of hanging in and hitting those deep crossers. But almost more importantly, like we finally got to see this team really play from behind, and they were able to get points. So I do think there is like reasons to be encouraged. Like if we just do the participation trophy podcast, like I was happy to see a lot of it. I think unfortunately, like you get just that sick interception for Brian Branch, but that's obviously is a bummer. Where like as a quarterback, I think it's just tough. Like you can't have that. We'll talk about the 49ers, where that's another situation where it felt like a quarterback, like, hey, the safety, when they make a play, it just hurts a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm encouraged by the Vikings offense after this game because we saw Sam Darnold play pretty well. And there are going to be some games where the Vikings can win despite Sam Darnold, but this was one of those games where they might have won because of him. Where it really just came down to the wire there, where it was a pretty good game from him overall. The best thing that he did was 33% target share to Justin Jefferson. That's always a good strategy, is to throw to Justin Jefferson. He held on to the ball for a long time, like we mentioned on the preview. So had almost a 3-second time to throw. But there were a couple things, I thought he did a little bit below average. Like there are too many targets to Johnny Munt. Like those aren't going to be efficient targets most of the time. He took a couple sacks, like just like things that the really, really good quarterbacks can kind of separate from the quarterbacks that can be productive in offenses like these. But the one thing that worries me a bit about the Vikings offense is what happens to them when they have to go off script. And so you have a Vikings offense right now that ranks second in the league in EPA per play on scripted drives, which is the first 15 plays of the game. But when they have to go off script, they've actually been a slightly below average offense after that. And so I don't know if part of that is, again, just like being in scenarios where they've been up by so much, where they haven't really had to do much on offense, which can definitely play a factor in this. But I also think part of it is Kevin O'Connell is very good at the script. But some of their maybe interior offensive line concerns or what Darnold does on a play-to-play basis and some of the variants that he provides, like maybe they just aren't as good when they have to go off script. So it'll be interesting to kind of follow that the rest of the season for them as well.
The script conversation, it's always tough for me because you have this kind of idea from Bill Walsh where it's like we're gonna drop exactly what the first 15 plays are. Yeah, and teams will use some or like a higher number, some teams will use a lower number. Then you have teams that will just be like, all right, well, these are going to be our drive openers. And then you have like guys like Kyle Shanahan, and I think a lot of coordinators where at the second half they'll kind of write like 10 like series openers on a paper, and they'll kind of lean on those a little bit as they get some of the drives. And then of course you're gonna have set plays where it's like, okay, well, it's 3rd and 5. Like these are the kind of 6 plays that we're gonna kind of dig from. And then the kind of art of it all is like, well, how are you tying it all together kind of cohesively? And it's tough for me to when I look at it sometimes. Now, like I'm thinking about that Justin Jefferson touchdown a little bit later in the game where you're kind of motioning a receiver from outside to inside, which Jefferson starts as the number 2 receiver. He becomes the outermost receiver. They like run it a few times kind of on earlier drives, and then he ends up being, or like he runs an in breaker, he runs an out breaker, then he runs a vertical off of it, where it's like, all right, well, I've seen that motion in the first quarter, I've seen that motion in third quarter, and now it's really setting up this touchdown in the fourth quarter. So it's like It's like, like, is that kind of like, do you count that as scripted? Because like I know he wanted to get to that play. Like you obviously can't count it. Like if you're just kind of considering it, I feel like just looking at it as like, all right, well, on their early game drives, like they're really hitting the ground fast. And I don't know, is it variance? I feel like maybe not. It feels if you like continue to look at it, you get kind of a good enough sample size. It's just hard for me sometimes to look at it. Maybe I'm just making excuses for my guy Kevin O'Connell here, but it certainly does. I think this year I feel like the offense has like started really fast and then kind of has hit some kind of bumps in the road through it. Like you get that really nice Aaron Jones run early on where you get the cornerback kind of looking too far inside. The ball is able to kind of bounce outside and you go ahead and get that. I guess for me, when I'm looking at this game, I'm like, all right, well, like you go down and then you get points like when you need that. So that felt really good. Where, of course, the Vikings had to have like a forced fumble return for a touchdown. So I think because you have that, like, you can't count on that in multiple games. So maybe like the game is a little bit kind of further apart than you actually have. So I will continue to monitor that because we're going to talk about the Vikings again. We have to talk about the Vikings again at some point. I do want to talk about Detroit's defense a little bit here, where I mean, Brian Branch, Tage, I think when we started talking about them before the season, you're like, oh no, like I think he's probably going to play safety. And I was like, oh, but like, let's leave this guy in the nickel. Come on. I mean, him at safety has been so fun. Just like absolutely awesome. Like you can have that interception where you're cutting off a crosser from the opposite side of the field when he's kind of playing like just over receiver anyway, but he can also just like play man coverage against a really fast guy like Jalen Naylor. So an incredible skill set. I mean, talking about the interception again, just like body control at that level is so crazy because it's not like he's 6'5" or anything except for him to be able to kind of reach like that. But my concerns here, I think, are of course you lose Aiden Hutchinson, and then the kind of eyes should go to that edge rusher spot where I think they had good snaps from Reader and McNeil inside. You can get that kind of push there, but like, hey, they had to lean on more blitzes. They weren't able to get a home as much until like the fourth quarter. There was a screen and go touchdown that the blitz kind of ended up forcing a scramble on. So like, I guess like it makes sense that that's kind of Glenn's button to push, but I don't know, Tish, you got to pick up the phone, and I'm sure there were calls made last week. It feels like you got to keep on making some more this week.
Yeah, I mean, they were going to have to blitz more without Aiden Hutchinson in this game. And I do think that a positive for Aaron Glenn is like he's a pretty good blitz designer. Like he's pretty creative with how he gets to certain blitzes. And so the Lions blitzed on 20 of 35 dropbacks in this game, which was the highest rate they've had in a couple of years. And they just weren't getting home, like you mentioned early on in the game. But later in the game, they were really able to get through the offensive line and end up getting three sacks against Sam Darnold. But yeah, this defensive line, especially at edge, just isn't super effective without Hutchinson, where they generated 15 pressures overall in this game. Aiden Hutchinson himself against Seattle generated 15 pressures when playing against the third string offensive tackle there. But like it'll have to be a lot of 5-6 man rushes, different guys coming through, Malcolm Rodriguez, Brian Branch. Like you just want different players that are going to be coming through the offensive line and just trying to get home, because a 4-man pass rush just really isn't going to be that effective for the Lions defense right now.
Yeah, I did love the decision at the end to blitz the Hail Mary. Like if it works, it looks great. If it doesn't, it's like, oh no, like why did the defensive coordinator ever do this? I do like the idea to be aggressive there, just kind of finishing up things there. I thought they did a good job. Like you get beat by that Aaron Jones run that I'm pretty sure was just like duo to the outside where Jones bounces, and then you find different ways to adjust to that. So you get your kind of extra body on the tight end there, and Jack Campbell, he's just entering the I'm good at football club, which is fun to see. I want to close off this game. Tish, does this game make you kind of change your mind or like how you look at either Detroit or Minnesota kind of in any way?
I mean, I do like both of like I guess all 4 units in this game a little bit more than I did coming in, where I just saw like a lot that I liked from both of them, where the Lions offense showed that they can play from behind. At points throughout this game, like you never know with a run heavy offense, like if they can play from behind. But the Lions proved that. Goff is obviously playing well. The Vikings offense themselves like showed that they can play from behind. When they were down 11 at multiple points in this game, and Darnold was able to play well. On top of that, Jefferson and Addison both look pretty good in this offense, and we're going to get Hawkinson back pretty soon. And the defense had nice moments as well. Like both defenses were getting pressure They were playing the run game well at some point. So I do feel better about these teams in the picture of the NFC going forward because they were able to match up against each other really well. And some of the other teams in the NFC are kind of just driving in circles right now. On top of that.
Yeah, I love that. I think I agree that I kind of feel good about everyone. Obviously, I think you look at it and say, all right, well, uh, like Minnesota, they have kind of flaws in their defense at different points. Like they can be beaten at the kind of one-on-one level. Of course, when you have a team like Detroit, like that, that might be the best team in the league. Like that makes sense. And yeah, for me, I really like kind of seeing Minnesota's offense able to produce a little bit from behind. So that was good. A really fun game.